Today's video is an overview of the Sei network and the Sei token. Sei is an up-and-coming layer 1 blockchain that is promising to dramatically scale both trading, the entire crypto ecosystem, as well as Ethereum execution environments. In today's video, we'll talk about what Sei is and what distinguishes it. We'll talk about how to get started using Sei, as well as some leading applications in the ecosystem. We'll go through the tokenomics of Sei's SEI token, and then we'll talk about some risks and opportunities with Sei right now. Welcome back to Dynamo DeFi. My name is Patrick. As a reminder, nothing in this video is financial advice. This is purely for educational purposes. Now let's get into the video. All right, to start, let's go through some background on Sei itself. And this is their website, sei.io, and they brand it as enabling mass adoption of digital assets. And they say that they're the fastest layer 1 blockchain designed to scale with the industry. And keep in mind, this is their website, so I know there may be disputes about which blockchain is actually the fastest, but regardless, I can say with confidence, having tested it out, they are in fact very fast. And some more background about what exactly Sei is. They're built using the Cosmos SDK, so it is part of the Cosmos ecosystem. Other chains on Cosmos you might be aware of are Injective, Osmosis, the Cosmos Hub, and there's dozens and dozens of others, but those are some of the large ones. But what makes Sei really stand out is that it is truthfully extremely fast. If we look at some of their stats compared to other leading blockchains, their current throughput is around 20,000 operations per second, and you can see that compared to Solana's 10,000, although I think with FireDancer, Solana should be even more. Their finality is also extremely fast, 380 milliseconds, so faster than Solana, allegedly. And then they're also parallelized, and we'll talk about more about what exactly being parallelized means in a second, but that's a really big feature that distinguishes them, especially among EVM chains, because starting next year, they'll be fully EVM compatible. And so they're really fast, like we saw, and they have a really strong team and set of backers as well. If we look at the backers, backed by Coinbase, backed by Jump, Delphi Digital, Layer Zero, a whole bunch of others. And, you know, one thing that I really liked about this that sort of attracted me is, although it's not a guarantee that tokens backed by these sorts of players do well, and you do have the added risk of being dumped on by early investors, although we'll look at tokenomics and the unlock schedule later in the video. What I like about this is that a lot of these protocols, if you look at the last cycle, Delphi Digital, for example, a lot of their top holdings did extremely well. And part of that is because these big operators, these exchanges, these investors, etc., they've got a lot of power in the industry, right? And they obviously have an incentive to support their portfolio companies. Coinbase, for example, is one of, if not now, the largest exchange, certainly the largest in the United States. And they, of course, have an incentive that they want to support in some way these projects that they're investing a lot of money in. And so I actually think that if the tokenomics don't disqualify it, having these sorts of backers can be a good thing. And then the other thing is Coinbase, Jump, Delphi Digital, they're going to have teams that do a lot of due diligence on these projects they invest in. So if you're worried, for example, about a project being a rug, when it's invested with by someone like Multicoin Capital, Coinbase, etc., you can be pretty confident that even if the project doesn't work out, that it's not a rug, right? It's just not every project works out. Some other things that are important to know with it as far as their backers is that they have a really strong set of founders. One of the founders previously worked at Goldman Sachs. The other founder was a lead engineer at Robinhood. And so when they originally envisioned Sei, the original vision was that it would be a way to scale exchanges. And this is an article that's actually written by one of the founders. And in this, he outlines his version of what he calls the exchange trilemma. So you may have heard the blockchain trilemma. This is the exchange trilemma. And the exchange trilemma, as he lays it out, is that an exchange cannot be both scalable, decentralized, and capital efficient. And you can see that, for example, a centralized exchange would be scalable and capital efficient, but not decentralized. Automated market makers are scalable and decentralized, but not capital efficient. And then CLOBs are decentralized and capital efficient, but they are not scalable. And so basically, they started out building this Sei project with the idea that it would be an exchange that solved these issues by having very high throughput and so on and so forth. And then they ended up turning it into its entirely own layer 1 built on Cosmos. And And the way that it can scale so much, among other things, because it's definitely a very technically dense project, but one thing that they do that's really powerful and also really good for traders is that transactions are parallelized. And so for most transactions, for example, on Ethereum, the way that they're processed is it does one transaction, then it does another, then it does another, then it does another. On a parallelized blockchain, what it does is it's going to get a set of transactions all at once. So imagine I put an order into the exchange, you put an order to the exchange, someone else over there puts another order into the exchange. It's going to get all those orders and it's going to process them all at the same time. And so that allows it to be faster. It ensures that it doesn't get, I know the term clog isn't totally appropriate, but basically it doesn't get bogged down, suffer diminished performance if a ton of people are putting through transactions at once. And it also prevents front running, because since our transactions are being processed at the same time, it can't be, I couldn't front run you, you couldn't front run me. So that's really powerful. They already have some solid projects building on it as well. Axelar, a cross-chain bridging platform, is building on Sei. Pyth, a leading oracle on the Solana and Cosmos ecosystem, is on there. Sushi, one of the OG dexes. And then there's a lot more as well. If I look over here at their ecosystem, then you can see, I mean, these are just the featured apps here. If we look at all the applications built on here, they've got some serious partners that have or will build on Sei at some point. And this is pretty solid for a new blockchain that really only launched their mainnet this year, right? That's pretty powerful. And then they also, something else important, they have a $120 million Sei ecosystem fund. Now, that is a bit of a risk because that could mean more Sei coming into circulation. However, look at what happened with blockchains that did ecosystem funds in the past, especially during a bull market. In 2021, for example, Avalanche went from being this kind of, maybe not middle tier in terms of tech. I actually, Avalanche was the first chain I covered on this channel, but mid tier in terms of market cap. I think it was around the middle of the top 100, to suddenly being top 20, top 10. And that was because they had a large ecosystem fund that was able to attract a lot of people to bridge over to Avalanche. And another thing I want to highlight is this parallelized thing is really crucial, especially because next year Sei is coming out with Sei V2, which is there'll be an Ethereum execution environment on Sei that will be parallelized. And I'll link this down in the description so you can read it all for yourself. I'm not going to go through all of this in the video. However, to think of the implications of it, this past week, inscriptions started to take off on a lot of EVM chains. That's basically where you use the call data and smart contracts to encode information. Kind of debatable how useful it is, right? It makes more sense on Bitcoin where they don't have native smart contracts, but they took off, and you saw some EVM chains go from having, for example, in the case of Avalanche, 200,000 to 300,000 transactions a day to having nearly 5 million a day. And same thing on Arbitrum. It went from having 600,000 a day to having over 5 million one day. And the problem was that Arbitrum shut down. Avalanche, the transactions became insanely expensive, in some cases comparable to Ethereum itself. And having this parallelized environment could help to prevent that sort of issue from happening on EVM chains, especially also the fact that it has very high transaction throughput. So I think that this narrative of having a high throughput parallelized EVM is going to potentially become a very powerful one, especially as we go into a bull run. Another solution to this, by the way, because I like these other projects on this channel, another solution is something like Avalanche has subnets where you could split out applications into their own subnet. Because for example, you can't have a consumer application or a traditional finance application going down because people are writing inscriptions on chain, especially for multiple days. That's just not realistic. But this highly scalable parallelized roadmap from Sei is also a way to ensure that uptime. If you're interested in this, then maybe you want to start using it. Here's how you can actually start using Sei yourself. The first thing you'll need to do is actually get funds on Sei, and you could buy it on a DEX. There's a lot of DEXs that have it. Unfortunately, not that many that have it if you're in the United States. However, if you're in a place that has Sei on a DEX, then you can see the markets here. For example, it's on a lot of major exchanges like Binance, MEXC, etc. I'll drop a link down below. However, if you're not somewhere that has it, or you just want to buy it on chain, then one thing that you can do is use their third-party bridge. And they have a bridge here from a lot of chains like Solana, Ethereum, Polygon, Arbitrum, etc. And you can bridge these source tokens like ETH, USDC, WRAP BTC onto Sei. And I'll say this is what I tried at first. I tried it with ETH. And the problem I ran into is that there was basically no liquidity on the chain to swap it. So I had all this ETH here, literally couldn't swap it. There was like a few $100s of liquidity. So I had to bridge it back, right? And to make matters worse, I didn't have any Sei to pay for gas. So I had to find another way to get that in. And so what I ended up using when I bridged in, by the way, I think there may be liquidity for USDC, so you might be able to do that. But what I ended up doing was actually use RocketX, which I talked about before on this channel. They have literally hundreds of blockchains on here. And so what I used with RocketX was I went from two different chains, from Solana and from three actually. Solana, ETH, and Cosmos, just moving around some funds. And I was just able to bridge all those and convert it directly to Sei through RocketX. And that's because RocketX basically routes the transactions through centralized exchanges. So it feels like it's in your wallet, but it's actually being routed through a centralized exchange. And that's what I used to get Sei onto the network and buy it. Once you're there, there's a few things you could do. You could stake it. Estimated APR 4.74% right now. Nothing to write home about, but better than nothing. And you never know. Sometimes there's airdrops, especially for stakers in the Cosmos ecosystem. So if you're holding it, you may consider staking it. Personally, I'm not, because I want to have the flexibility to trade, and that 5% is not quite enticing enough for me. But maybe I'll stake a bit just to qualify for any potential airdrops, because that would be kind of rough if I didn't get them. Other things you can do is Sei does have a DeFi ecosystem. It's growing, but still small. The only app actually with over $1 million in TVL is Astroport, which is the leading exchange, and that's been growing. Still only about $5 million in TVL though. So if you want to swap, you want to provide liquidity, you can go to sei.astroport.fi and do it there. There's not that many tokens to swap for on here now. I think there's some meme coins people launched. There's some other tokens that have been bridged over. There's this Astro token. So check it out, try it. If you look at the pools right now, simply because the trading volume on the network has been so high, a lot of these pools have kind of ridiculous APRs. I mean, Sei USDC has 300% APR. Kind of wish I was in this pool. It doesn't have very much liquidity, but that's a pretty nice APR. However, you got to keep in mind that's probably not going to last forever, right? Because either people will add liquidity or volume will decrease. But that is what you can do in the Sei ecosystem. Let's talk a bit about the SEI Tokenomics now. To start, if we look at the circulating supply, 2.3 billion are in circulation with 10 billion in total, and that puts its undiluted market cap around 859 million, with its fully diluted valuation around 3.7 billion, and that places it at rank 81. So it's in the top 100, recently broke into here. If you look, you can see that it's gone up a non-trivial amount recently. It is, let's see, it's 30 days, 90 days. It was hovering around 9-10 cents, up over 36 cents now, 35 cents. So you can see that it's done basically a little over a 3x in a few months. However, it's still not outrageously high compared to other layer ones. If we look at some comps, for example, we of course have Solana at 35 billion, but that's kind of an extreme example. To look at some other high throughput layer ones like Aptos, for example, then that is currently around 2.5 billion, and fully diluted, that's around 9 billion. So even though Sei is already relatively high, if it's able to attract people, it certainly has the room to grow more. If we look at the unlock schedule, then we can see that they have a constant stream of unlocks. However, their major unlocks between private sale investors and the team don't actually start until 2024. Looks like they start a year after launch. So they start in August of 2024. And by the time that happens, then the total unlock supply will have grown from around 2 point some billion to around 2.6 billion. And so, yeah, that is some dilution for sure. And then once the team and private sale people start to unlock, then yeah, over the next 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to have a good amount of dilution. But keep in mind, a lot can happen in that time, right? So it kind of depends on your time frame. If you're expecting a bull run in 2024, then the fact that unlocks start in August of 2024 maybe doesn't matter for you. Maybe the fact that, even halfway through to get it to double, we've got to go until basically the end of 2025. There's a good chance that if we have another crypto cycle in that time, that it may have already played out and peaked by then, or it'll certainly be close. So although this is something that I think will add additional sell pressure, it's not something that I'm too concerned about. Finally, let's talk about the risks and opportunities of Sei. I always like to talk about both the positives and negatives on these tokens that I cover. And to start, we'll talk about the positives. Let's talk about the opportunities. For one thing, like I mentioned before, they have a lot of projects scheduled to launch here. And when you throw in that ecosystem fund, that $120 million ecosystem fund, a lot of these projects might have a lot of firepower or incentives to attract users. So I think that could be pretty powerful. Another thing is this parallelized thing, and especially this parallelized EVM in Sei V2 that's launching next year. I think that could be a major, major catalyst, especially if the congestion on EVM networks continues, because there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of builders, in fact, who have built on other EVM networks, who they want something that can scale their app and they don't have to worry about gas fees spiking for their users. So I think that we'll see a lot of interest in deploying on here around then. Another thing is that because Sei is in the Cosmos ecosystem itself has been doing well. I think Sei has the potential to be one of the leading general purpose layer ones in Cosmos. There's many other powerful layer ones in Cosmos that I like. Injective, for example. Celestia is another one, but Celestia is focused on data availability. Injective is optimized for finance and trading. Since you can build general purpose applications on Sei, there's already an NFT marketplace on there, for example, then I could see it becoming the leading general purpose layer one on Cosmos, but TBD if that still happens. As far as the risks of this, well, one risk is that the price has already gone up. That's just, something you always got to keep in mind, and if the whole market corrects, then this is probably going to correct with it. Another risk are these unlocks. Although I said that I'm not too concerned about it, that doesn't mean that I'm not aware of the fact that tokens are constantly being put into circulation, and then you have tokens incentives, treasury releases. Eventually you will have a team and early investors start to release. So that is something that I would be cautious of, especially if it pumps a lot and then a lot of those investors are able to sell at a significant profit. And then another risk that I would say is that it's relatively new. So although the team is strong, although the tech so far as I can see is strong, it's relatively new. This Sei V2 hasn't been launched yet, and delays can happen. Unexpected things can happen, and so we'll have to see whether the tech actually plays out. If you want to learn about more trends like Sei, then check out my newsletter, dynamodefi.substack.com. Free newsletter once a week, and then a paid version that goes into more detail on some of these things. Link down in the description. And that's all for today. If you want more videos like this, be sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, this is Dynamo DeFi.